Welcome to Living History. My name is Carl Jarecki, and today my special guest is Hugo Roach. Thank you for coming in.
My pleasure.
I wanted to ask you some questions about what you've been doing over your lifetime here so far, and especially about your times here in the Conejo Valley. Why don't you tell me about when you first came to the Conejo Valley and what brought you here?
Well, I arrived here in this time of year in 1971. I was hired in by Joe Leggett into the Jantz Corporation. My job there was to be in charge of the operating properties, and so as a part of that, I was looking after shopping centers and apartments and industrial parks and golf courses, and all through the 70s, that's what we were all about. Sideline was, probably the reason I was brought in is because I'd been in real estate consulting around North America for a number of years before that, and Jantz Corp was just getting ready to get involved in the development of a major regional shopping center, and they needed somebody on staff who could coordinate with either partner developers or city agencies in bringing that project around. And so that was the background that was of interest to Jantz Corp, and that's why I arrived in the Conejo.
Now we're talking about the Jantz Mall at this point.
No, we're talking about the Oaks Regional Shopping Center.
Now tell me about that. Back then, the Oaks Shopping Center, the development of it was actually a controversial subject here in the city, wasn't it?
Oh, a major controversy. But the projects of that size, because you're talking about a $100 million project, take an awful lot of time to put together and to bring in front of the permittable authorities, and also have all of the special interests of department stores and their corporate bureaucracies, and you need a lot of time to bring them all together. And at the same time, here in the Valley, we were having major debates and major hearings and major discussions on what was the proper size and the proper timing, and so it was a major project involving lots and lots of public hearings, lots and lots of public presentations all around the Valley, and it culminated with an all-night hearing in 1974. That was when the project was finally approved after numerous hearings. So
has time shown the criticism of the project to be right or wrong? The malls, at least in my opinion, I think it was a pretty good development.
Oh, it's a wonderful project, and it has been from virtually day one. It's really kind of interesting that you can have the debates that we had during those times. We have a very prominent lady, former mayor, council person who was on the planning commission at that time, and she was not opposed to the shopping center, but she was opposed to the size of it. She thought it should be half the size. And from our professional experience, what we were believed then, and I think it's proven to be right, is you did need an optimum size so that you didn't have little bits and pieces all around. It was better to have the concentration. And so in many cases, it wasn't should we or shouldn't we. In many cases, the debate went over what was the proper size and the timing. And so there was an awful lot of discussion on that, and it was not always, there was a lot of emotion involved.
As there usually is with these
Right,
large
right.
projects. So you've actually lived here in Thousand Oaks for the last 30 years?
Almost, yeah.
What was it like back in 1971?
Oh, it was a nice community then, just as it is now. It's a nice place to raise kids. It always felt nice. We have a huge city that feels like a small town, and you can go almost any place and see people that you've been around for a long time, and that's a very comforting feeling. It's a very friendly place.
Is there anything you miss from the changes that have taken place?
Not at all. I don't think that you can ever evolve and have a real attractive place unless there are changes that take place. I think some of the biggest arguments I'd have with some people today is that if they want to go back to when it was nice, well, it's nicer today than it was. So it was nice then, but it's nicer now.
You know, we often talk about how things have changed, but rarely talk about how things have remained the same. Has anything really remained the same between the early 70s and today?
Well, I'll tell you, one of the things that's remained the same is the community atmosphere and the community feeling and the cohesiveness that we have here in this valley. It's a very nice place to be, and it's very comforting. I think most of the reason that we are attractive and most of the reasons we have growth pressures is because we do feel nice and we do feel comfortable. It is a nice place to be.
If you had to describe Thousand Oaks to somebody who didn't live in the state, what would you tell them about the community?
Oh, I tell them it's a reasonable sized city that feels like a small town. It's a easy and comfortable place to be.
If you had to pick one person, who do you think's had the biggest impact on the development of Thousand Oaks?
Well, I wouldn't presume to pick one person to start with, because I don't think that you have a community based on one person. So I think just as soon as you name one person, you probably are causing a problem. But there are a few people that I think that deserve special recognition, and certainly Ed Jans is one, and certainly Joe Leggett is another. And both of those are people that I worked with very closely, and both of them were high-minded and interesting and also forward-looking people. So it was really of interest to be around and be in their company.
What do you think the biggest challenge going forward is for the community?
Well, I worry about attitudes. I worry about, and most of them, I think maybe if we had a orientation and an indoctrination facility here in City Hall, and maybe one of the criteria, instead of having a house inspection, maybe what you'd have is just an orientation that new buyers into the valley would go through, and they could learn a little bit about what it is and what's made it what it is, as opposed to moving in from Van Nuys and all of a sudden knowing what is really nice and trying to change everything that's happened in the past. Most of us that have been here a while have a little bit of cynicism about those who've just arrived and want to change anything. 30 years ago, we were talking about how nice it would be if we kept everybody out, and because we don't want it to change. 30 years later, we're still talking about the same thing. And the thing that would give you some confidence, though, is despite all that, it's still a nice place. It's still a wonderful place to be. And I think we have a lot of angst and concerns that we have to worry about as far as, whether we're doing the right projects up and down the boulevard, whether they enhance the city or not. But whether you should have change or not have change, I don't think that's the question. Yeah, I think you absolutely need to have, I think you need this to keep increasing the state of the art. I think it's okay to...
Well, is there anything that could have been done better in Thousand Oaks to plan it out as a community? Was there something that was missed over the last 30 years that you saw that could have been but wasn't?
I'm sure a lot of things could have been done better, but I think hindsight is wonderful. I think one of them is projects like we're sitting in right now. Conceivably, it could have been done at another part of the boulevard instead of right here, and maybe that would have. But the fact is, the predominant feeling was to put it here, so it works.
And you're talking about the Civic Arts Plaza, obviously.
I am.
Have you been to a performance here?
I have, lots. Sure, it's wonderful.
It is.
Yeah. Oh, sure. The worst thing about the plaza is just the way it sets up from the street, not the freeway. I think that's fine, but it'd be nicer to have a nicer vista from the street. And if we could at some point find a way to do that, I think it would enhance us.
Well, being in real estate and asset management for all these many years, what's your impression of the East Side development, the project that will eventually go on this side of the Civic Arts Plaza?
Well, obviously the area needs to be put to good use. Sometimes when we introduce some of our civic policies into it, that changes the arm's length economics of things, and so the city's involvement in dictating what goes there and then presuming that it's going to be profitable might be a major conflict. So you are going to have to worry about to what extent it's going to be necessary for the city to subsidize what they'd like to see there. Because I think just, if I don't know whether you would recognize this, Carl, but there was a time when there was a hotel proposed here on site. The hotel was never economic, and you can have an economic study that would say so, but the real operators said not there.
Mm.
And the same sort of thing applies to whether you're going to be talking about a restaurant, office place, skating rink, whatever. And I'm sure that the wisdom of this community and the civic officials that you have will be able to resolve that over time. But it's just that I think instead of being an arm's length economic development, I think there'll have to be some subsidies of some sort to accomplish it.
What's been your greatest personal achievement so far?
Mine, I think I'll let somebody else worry about that, but I have to tell you that I have 4 lovely kids and a wonderful wife, and so it's a very nice existence in that regard. And I have 12 grandchildren, and they all live within 10 minutes of me, and so it's real nice to have access to that kind of a family.
That's great. What is your greatest hope for the future for Thousand Oaks?
For Thousand Oaks?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I think that it continues to evolve in a perfectly reasonable manner. The divisiveness we've had here politically the last few years has not been too much fun. I would rather see us handle our debates in a more civilized fashion. But on the other hand, it's a democracy, and so things get handled, and I'm sure we will. But my preference is to have us continue to evolve and upgrade and improve, and I think that my family and those that are here after I'm gone will benefit from that. So,
how would you like the community to remember you?
Remember me?
Yes.
Oh, as a wonderful fisherman. As a top-notch skier who didn't like the cornice. I don't know, animal lover.
All of those are good things.
Right.
Especially because you're a trout fisherman.
Exactly.
Good.
Yeah.
Very nice. Since you brought that up, are there any things I haven't asked you, or subjects we haven't talked about that we should?
Sure, lots of them.
Do you have one in particular? Could you pick one out of a hat?
Well, sure. I have a lot of, going back 20 years, we had Measure A here in town. Measure A was an effort to try and probably limit growth. A lot of the proponents, and many of them whom I'm very fond of and very friendly with even today, thought that it was just a wonderful measure, and put it up to the rest of the world as being a manner in which we can control growth. The only thing was that the economy hit in about the time Measure A was coming on, and we couldn't have developed more than 500 residential units a year during those early years of that program anyway. So what we really did is we took a concept, let the economy come in and impact it and increase the cost of government. And that's a democracy. And it's really nice to sit back and look at how you can have these big differences on good, bad, or indifferent. And when you get all through, people of goodwill still manage to handle things in a nice way, and it looks nice.
Great. Well, that's a very positive thought. Hugo, I want to thank you for joining us today
All right.
on Living History. It's been a real pleasure.
It's my pleasure. Thank you, Carl.